Hello and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Domingo.
And I'm your co-host, Virginia Grenier.
We'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy some inspiring conversation. Here at Language of the Soul, we know that life is story. Individually, we're the products of the stories we tell about ourselves. Culture is the amalgamation of the stories we weave about the human condition. Here's the thing. Individually and collectively, we can write our own story. Thanks for tuning in and joining in the march toward human potential. Alexandra Bourne is a medicine woman, artist, and storyteller whose work bridges the ancient and contemporary through soul, story, and ceremony. Her creative journey, the pilgrimage to the cradle of mankind, traces not only a path across sacred landscapes, but a deep exploration of what it means to be human. For 10 years, she has traveled solo in remote places, completing a pilgrimage where the first heartbeats of humanity once echoed, in the lands of Africa. On this journey, Alexandra experienced art as both language and medicine. An invocation of color, form, and movement became tools for remembrance and healing. Guided by music, writing, and the teachings of elders and medicine people, she has cultivated a practice that honors rhythm, ritual, and intention as vehicles for transformation. Through her art and storytelling, Alexandra invites others into a shared ceremony of awakening, one that celebrates connection, humility, and the living pulse of spirit that unites us all. In her own words, between story, artwork, and music, or any form of creative work, we are able to generate emotion and resonance that sits behind the mask of ego and conditioning. I truly believe having healthy and expansive dialogue can create the best waves of change in a world that surely needs to be uplifted in truth. Amen. Welcome, Alexandra Bourne.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Is there anything in the bio that I should correct?
No, that was pretty spot on.
Sounded like you.
I liked it.
Right on. Well, again, thanks so much for being here. Virginia, by the way, is our lovely co-host and producer. Welcome.
Thank you. I am here and getting my brain in tune.
Yeah, we've had quite the week. So,
Yeah.
I think all of us are kind of decompressing. Is Mercury in retrograde? Anyone know?
Oh, it's always in retrograde.
Well, it feels like it in my life. They say communication and technology suffers. Oh, you had a little technical glitch this morning, Virginia.
I did, yeah. Actually trying to get everything up so we could do today I was just watching the circle just spin, and it was trying to put me into a trance, I think.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's a meditative trance. It's exactly what you need. See, the universe provides when you're receptive. Synchronicity. Okay, well, the way we'd like to start, I think, as you know, Alexandra, is just with a general rote question. And we have been asking a certain question throughout this season, but I wanted to tweak it a little bit just after learning about you and being inspired by you. And I may use this one moving forward because I think it's pretty universal and it's not earth-shattering or anything, but I just feel like you might have something to say about it. What, in your opinion, is the relationship between creativity or creative expression and spirituality?
It's a beautiful question. I had a dabble with this one a little bit along my journey, particularly when I was living off grid, when I was trying to understand the spirituality behind, no external voices, just kind of my voice and creator's voice. And I think creativity is the expression of spirituality. When I was off grid and my food was covered and my, all my bare minimum, bases of survival were covered. At the end of the day, I asked myself what I would want to be doing with my time and my energy. And it was to create, whether it was going out and playing my guitar or whittling some wood or, just doing something with my hands and my imagination. And I think that comes in the form of, different forms of expression. And that includes storytelling, and same with like the ancient tribes and how they use storytelling as a form of creativity to inspire their spiritual practices. So I think it just embodies it in entirety,
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Yeah,
Mm.
there's so much to say about it. I'm kind of looking forward to hearing how people express it. And that's beautifully put because, yeah, one could say creativity is the expression of spirit. They're almost inseparable, in my opinion. So anyway, that was beautifully put. Thank you so much. For listeners, I want to back up a little bit, and maybe in your own words, you could tell us, how you got to this point. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this pilgrimage, how it came about, and then your current endeavors, your current pursuits. So the best way, again, I did a lot of reading, but I'd love to hear it from you. It seems like, and sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. You're starting to publish, and I did want some clarity on this. Are you publishing it in installments? The initial essay, The Art of Breaking Chains, is that something that's going to, that we're going to get more of in the future, or was that a one-time post?
Yeah. So the Art of Breaking Chains was something that I wrote along my journey of the pilgrimage. And what I had done is I'd actually published that book a few years ago when it was written. And then I kind of took it off of the publishing websites because I wanted to revisit it. I think I gained a little bit more wisdom along the way, and I wanted to kind of, fine tune it a little bit more. And then when I went to go and publish it again, there was just something that said inside of me, put it out there, just put it out there for people to read, put it out there for, educational purposes. And so I put the first section up on my website because we're just kind of coming out of the cave. Like, I feel like I was in a bear's cave for a while, just, brewing and birthing this final piece of the pilgrimage. And because that was kind of like a taster on the pilgrimage, I thought, okay, well, this will be a nice way to start gain momentum on some of the concepts that I've learned along the way. So the first part that's on the website is available to the public, and then I think every week I'm going to post another section because it's quite a collection, a series, and allow it to kind of evolve itself. Yeah.
And do they all include paintings? That series of paintings is, obviously speaks for itself. It tells a story completely independent of the prose. Will each installment have artwork with it as well? I mean, no pressure. I'm just curious.
Yes, it absolutely will.
Nice.
Yeah. So when I wrote that initially, it actually was all the paintings were done first. And then I got to look at the paintings because that was the, invocation of feeling. That was where I could put it. And I didn't know what words I really wanted to capture yet. And then when I put it onto the paintings, as an artist, sometimes you intend for a painting to go a certain way and it has its own course.
Yeah.
And that's where spirit comes in and holds the paintbrush for you. And you're like,
right.
Okay, here we go, man. So it was the paintings were done, and then the wording came afterwards, and then the wording has like evolved over time as well, just based on the evolution of the wisdom and the deeper dives into the psyche and into the spiritual practice.
Yeah, well, they perfectly complement one another, even in retrospect. I think sometimes we do express viscerally and then slowly. I mean, I read things I've written years before. I mean, The Seeker, I have a novel out right now, and I've reread it and thought, well, God, I didn't see that level, but I do now because life experience catches up, and that's the beauty of storytelling is that, I would say the universe works through you, not to be too lofty about it, but, there are, if you're human, there's going to be many levels on which to relate to something. And I often read my own work later and realize, oh, okay, that's what I was working through, or that's what's universal, that's of benefit to humanity. So I do get that. When I read I keep saying prose, the essay that accompanied the paintings, I thought, well, that is exactly what is being conveyed viscerally through the imagery, right? And it makes sense that you had some perspective over time and were able to articulate it better. So I think they complement one another beautifully. And yeah, I was just hoping there would be more. So thanks for confirming that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but maybe for listeners, I initially didn't catch that was midway through your journey in New Zealand, I think, right? Near Taranaki. That you were inspired to do that series of paintings. But maybe back up even more and tell us, because you did say in the Art of Breaking Chains that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you had a little bit of an identity crisis that inspired you to first go on, I'm going to call it a walkabout.
Mm-hmm.
First, go on your, what is the best word? Journey? Your,
Walkabout, pilgrimage, odyssey. I think it's just, I call it a medicine walk
yes.
initially. But yeah.
Yeah, what
Yeah,
inspired you to first skip town and go on this amazing walk?
Well, initially, I think I was just born rebellious. I think I just walked into this world with a bit of fire in me, and no one could ever tell me what to do. No one could ever kind of put me in a box and say this is XYZ. So I think I had this sense that there was something more to the constructs, to the societal conditioning, to the lifestyle that we're kind of exposed to in Western culture. And unfortunately, my mother came from Poland, so I was exposed to a bit of contrast at a younger age with going back and forth between Canada to Poland, kind of seeing a different way of living. So I was like, oh, there is something more out there. And then when I, went through, the schooling and everything, and I was like, okay, here's my freedom. I grabbed my backpack and I just jumped on a plane with my sister and we backpacked Europe for a couple months. And I was like, okay, this is great. But it was actually a lot of, tourist attraction kind of traveling and, sightseeing and that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm just getting like the tip of the iceberg to what culture and contrast is here.
I'm sorry, how old were you at that point, the backpacking trip?
I think I was around 19 or 20 years old at that point. So that's like the initial thing that started the pilgrimage, was just scratching the surface of the world.
Right.
And then, going afterwards to do some more deeper dives. I started traveling after that, and mostly on a whim. Actually, it was just kind of like sporadic. Okay, let's choose this country and go and do a deep dive. Let's go to Spain and live off grid for 3 months with a 75-year-old lady. Why not? And do all these kinds. Let's go to Thailand and go do some kickboxing. Why not? And just starting to like really go into these places with the, without the language barrier, or with the language barrier rather, and with all these, contrast and opposition is our greatest teacher for us and on the journey. So, and then, as we unraveled that, it was, at the beginning, it was just kind of a curiosity. And then it was like, oh, I'm on a mission, oh, this is more than just curiosity. This is, the deep dive of understanding why I'm existing, why I'm a human, why I'm here. So it became to get a little bit deeper as I went. And
was there an aha moment where you realized it was bigger than just, that itch to travel, or did it kind of happen over time?
Yeah, I think the aha moment, I had many aha moments, and it's actually, it was actually like, there was times where I wanted to settle down, and it was almost like I was being urged back onto the road. It's like The Alchemist. It's like, you think that that where you want to be is exactly there, and then all of a sudden, all these signs and symbols and these poles start to come, and you're like, no, and the ego wants to say, no, I'm happy. This is familiar. I'm good here. But the heart is like, we've got things to do. and so and then if you don't listen, which is me, I'm quite stubborn. So if I don't listen to the calls, usually they come with a little bit of a backhand from spirit, a spiritual timeout, kick to the road, out you go.
Yeah, the way I put it is the universe speaks louder and louder to get your attention.
Yeah.
The stakes get higher. If you repeat a cycle, the stakes get higher and higher.
That's it. That's it.
Well, I love that you obeyed it. Do you know what I mean? Instead of, a lot of people would just fall back on ego and what's comfortable. So I love that you, once you identified the mission, that you stuck to the red road. Because I think you have a lot of wisdom to share now. Do you mind sharing just some of the geographic regions you visited, or some of the cultures with whom you spent time?
Yeah. So the original first solo trip that I did was to Spain with this 75-year-old woman, where I was isolated in the mountains for a few months. And that was, really early in my 20s. So it was quite a shock. And then after that, I went to Croatia, and I had a bit of a scare, a bit of a dance with sex trafficking or something like that. It was more of a traumatic. It was a close call, I say.
Right.
So nothing happened, but it was a rescue mission, something you'd probably see in a movie scene. And all of a sudden, I'm coming back to Canada, and I was like, okay, cool. there's this obstacle in the way, there's an innocence, there's a naivety to traveling as a solo female in the world. So then I went into kickboxing, and I was like, okay, cool, let's protect ourselves.
Oh, in Canada, you learned kickboxing?
That's where I started. And then the next trip took me to Thailand to live and kickbox at a gym for a while. Wow. And so I lived on site at a gym, 4 hours a day, 6 days a week training. Yeah.
Sorry, I do want to hear, trust me, every country you visited and every culture, but just because you brought that up, I know one of the things you had hoped to talk about was the whole concept of traveling alone as a female. And to be honest, that's exactly where my mind went. There's a lot of sex trafficking in this world, and it's amazing that that's what you were confronted with. I have friends that have traveled alone and, they got mugged and that was their wake-up call. But that's pretty scary. So good for you for learning kickboxing. Do you want to talk about the challenges of traveling alone as a female a little more? Or is it kind of, have we exhausted that topic? It's got to have its own unique challenges, I would imagine.
Yeah. I think this is where the contrast of growing up in a very sheltered society and then having that curiosity and that zest, I walked with it was very humbling, really. It was walking without the tools that I needed and putting myself into dangerous situations that I wasn't educated on. Impulsiveness, I'm young and, I'm excited and, there's an abundance of temptations in the world that we can fall into. So for me, it was, I was doing all these random extremes and, going into different places. And when I finally had these little, these moments where it was close call moments, I started to see that, okay, I need to be a little bit more aware. And then after Croatia, I was pretty shook. And so when I came back, I realized, okay, do some things to protect yourself. Don't let this obstacle stop you or defeat you from doing what you love to do, but be smarter about it. And martial arts taught me that I wouldn't win the fight. It was just as humbling. It was, getting rid of the entitlement, the ego behind well, I can punch this dude in the face if they're attacking me. And really it's actually about, can you slow your breath down enough to think logically? Can you rationalize the situation? Can you diffuse a situation? Can you be proactive in this situation so that way you are able to navigate the territory you're going into? And especially, in Europe, it's one thing, but when I started going into other countries like Africa and stuff like that, your heightened sense of awareness around your safety is very prominent, right? And you need to exercise caution and just be aware of it. You're going to pick and choose your corruption anywhere you go.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was kind of wondering too with that when you're talking about awareness and stuff, because I know it's really easy, especially with how connected we are with the internet, that there's and now AI being involved too. Was there anything with that to where something was presented one way, and then once you were in that situation, you realized it was basically, like a catfishing type thing where it showed as possibly a safe, adventurous thing. But then when you got there were certain little things that started going, this isn't aligning with what I initially thought this was.
Actually, that's a perfect question because it's exactly what happened to me when I went to Croatia. So at the beginning of my journey, because I was young and just coming out of, college and things like that, financially, I was like, how am I going to travel? So I used, platforms like work exchange websites where, you work for your food and accommodation. So you're minimizing your expenses along your way, and which was wonderful. But I think we're sometimes very too trusting as human beings. And it's not bad to trust people, but it's just a reality check sometimes that, not everybody comes with pure intention. And so when I went to Croatia, it was on a platform that I used, and there was an advertisement to train some horses in Croatia. I was like, cool, this is great. And then when I got there, the ad was taking down, nothing was lining up, and my only saving grace was that I bought a SIM card at the airport. So I was able to make a phone call and I was able to call for help when I actually got to this position, because I was in the middle of nowhere, on a property that was boarded with barbed wire fences and gun signs everywhere. And I'm locked in this place. And I'm like, so I was able to make a phone call and then, get taken out of that situation. But, you don't really know how fast something escalates until you're in it. And you don't really, you kind of give the red flags the benefit of the doubt. because we're maybe a bit more naive to it at that age. So it definitely played a big factor in that journey.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, because
Of course.
I do think, we, when we're younger especially, we want to trust in, and it's like you're saying, like sites that are known trusted sites, and thinking, well, nothing should happen here, and still there's that, small percentage of vulnerability that something could go totally different than what you expect. So thank you for
You
sharing that.
know, in the 90s, I had I'm in LA, so I'm surrounded by performers, but both my roommates had been cruise ship performers, singers and dancers, and there was a whole circuit. I mean, there were friends that were performing on cruise ships, and then they would perform for royalty in the Far East and pretty much disappear. So, like, and that was in the early 90s. So, I do agree. I mean, I'm going to ask you about this. I'm going to sound really sexist, but I live near a lake, and there's women jogging with headphones on, completely unaware of their surroundings at dusk. Do you know what I mean? And or even at nightfall. And so I have 22 nieces and nephews, and a lot of them are pretty progressive. And I made some comment about those women, like, oh my God, be aware of your surroundings. And I might have said the word rape. And my niece, at her tender, I think she was in high school, she said, well, men get raped too. And I said, well, yeah, if you count prison rape, actually, they get raped more than women, truly, if you include those statistics. But, she was virtue signaling and trying to empower women in a way by saying it's a universal. And I really respected that. But I thought, well, I don't know. We don't really have the luxury. Let's talk about, do you know what I mean? The physical strength factor and how people are socialized. And it just seemed a little naive to me. Do you have anything to say to that? How do you empower girls and women and at the same time say, be vigilant?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's actually, so I after I've done years of training in martial arts and Krav Maga and everything like that. And, I was training with groups of men that were not shy to punch me in the face. I signed up for it, so I realized like the physicality is like, okay, actually, like I can be strategic as a woman, and I may get a couple good shots in and things like that. But the reality is, you're looking actually deeper than just the safety. You're looking at, constant generational trauma that lives within our bodies. So, for women who are, and I use this example when I used to teach at a community center classes for girls for self-defense. And I would use this as an example. I was like, if you feel uncomfortable, I was like, what does it hurt to take one headphone out? What does it hurt to just step aside for a minute and let the person who's walking behind you, that your body, your intuition, your gut is saying you're heightened for it. They could just be an everyday person. They don't have to be predatory, but your body is saying it's not feeling safe. So do something to mitigate the scenario before it escalates, right?
Right.
And just step to the side, or call a friend and just tell them your location all of a sudden, like very small strategic moves that we can do as women that offset the physical difference, and that was a big thing for me, because, I'm not here to make a man a predator or a woman a predator, but I am here to call a spade, and to acknowledge that, again, pure intentions don't always exist. And as women, especially with our generational trauma and our pain points, we carry a heightened sense because our bodies don't feel safe.
Yes.
And so
trusting your intuition is a big part of it, right?
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, I loved, Alexandra, that you shared that even when you're in kickboxing, you signed up for it, and for men to basically punch you in the face. So my spouse, he did years of taekwondo, got up to a black belt, and him and I would talk about that a lot, about, because he would have to spar against the females, because they didn't want to just put women, the females with females and the males with males. And so I asked him about that. I said, because it's always when we watch action movies too, like, they always show like these, like, maybe 120 pounds white women like kicking the butts of men that are like easily like 150 to 200 pounds, right, in the movies. And I'm like, that's so not real, right? I'm like, there was nobody in martial arts when you would go to competition and spar that. And he's like, no, he's like, I actually still hold back slightly as a man, because I knew that when there was somebody who was 90 pounds sitting across from me, male or female, I was going to clobber the heck out of them. And I wanted them to at least not, one round be down, to like make it, where we could at least have some spar and learn from each other. And he's like, yeah, he's like, but in a real fight, he's like, nope. He's like, chances, probably not.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I love that
absolutely.
you shared that, because I think sometimes as when we do go and take those type of classes and forget maybe the guys are holding back.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's why I thought with my niece, she was in high school. I should let her off the hook. But I thought, well, that's aspirational, but a little dangerous, And
Mhm.
so, like you're saying, there's maybe almost a romanticized version of it that we're seeing when we see women kicking ass in cinema. It's aspirational, but like let's acknowledge the real, like you said, what was your way of putting it? You want to call a spade a spade. There's got to be a balance there.
Mhm.
Anyway, I didn't mean to spend so much time on that, but thank you for that.
I
Where did you
liked
go
it.
next? How about that?
Yeah, so after Thailand, I took a trip to Bali. Like I was away for a few months, and I just did some solo traveling through Southeast Asia, and then headed over into Europe to see some friends. And then that's kind of when COVID broke out, and I had to go
Mm,
back to Canada. And then I was like, okay, cool. Now I can't travel. Now I'm isolated here. So I kind of came up with some. I just thought to myself, if I'm going to be, forced to stay inside, forced to be isolated, I'm going to do this somewhere really creative. I got a big country that I'm living in. So I took off. I took off to the Yukon and I lived off grid in a small, tiny home by myself.
wow.
I just brought a guitar with me and I took off for a few months and decided that I was really going to just see what isolation feels like if this is the world we're living in. And it was interesting because up there COVID wasn't quite a big deal, right? They had one COVID case the entire time I was up there. So it was kind of and it was interesting to be able to take, all the spiritual practice, all the different opinions and external voices, and then just have my voice, just
Mm,
have my voice with creator, my voice with nature, to really understand it. And I brought books with me and all the things, but I really just wanted to know what it meant to
mhm.
live from a place that was, if I was here first, you know what I mean? If there was no other external influence and I just got plucked on this earth by myself, what would I do with my time? What would I be
That
doing?
goes back to the topic of creativity and spirituality, because
Mhm.
there's some maybe over romanticized notions that all true inspiration comes from solitude. That's Letters to a
Mhm.
Young Poet, right?
Mm.
Rilke. And yet it's the same meditation, right? Stilling the mind, finding that stillness within, the well-being, and quieting the
Mhm.
mental chatter is kind of the goal of a lot of spiritual practices. But it's also, if you believe Rilke, right, where all true inspiration comes from creatively. So what was the biggest thing you learned in that isolation?
That it's messy.
Mm,
That it's messy work to go inside and quiet your mind. In my early 20s, I had done the off-grid thing and I had a taste of it. But when I really went in there, I was unwinding, all this trauma and all this overlap. And I was going into the generational trauma as well. It wasn't
mhm,
just mine. Like I was, okay, I've got my childhood, but I also have all the memory and the DNA of my ancestors that I'm
mhm,
carrying with me. So how do I unpack this? And to get from the head, which, for me, I'm very stubborn and my ego was quite strong. And so it was really just to get in behind it and be like, okay, I see that you're strong. I see that you're strong because you protected me and all these things. Let's have a dialogue. Let's have a conversation about why we're doing this. So it was actually wasn't about trying to quiet the mind. It was actually an invitation to have dialogue with it, to unravel it better. So I could get to the heart space again. And it was this conversation between the mind and the heart that we're going back and forth. And then knowing when, if it gets too messy, go for a walk in the woods, go and ground yourself, go and have a reset.
mhm.
Because it's a deep dive. It's a lot of work. And it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not easy. It's not easy to do on your own.
Well, but I mean, I like how you put it, that it's not about quieting the mind, it's about opening up a conversation, right? Because I
Mhm.
think it's normal. I'll just give one example. I had a friend, I keep going back to the 90s, I don't know why, but we went hiking in Yosemite, and it's definitely not the Serengeti, it's just Yosemite. But literally just the elevation and the fresh air. She had been through a divorce recently, and just being in nature, stripped of all the stimuli, she broke down and all the toxins came up, if that makes sense. And
Mhm.
I think it's normal, right, when you isolate or when you get back to nature, for all the things you've kind of become habituated to suddenly I don't know, come out because of the minimalism. I don't know if that makes sense, but I like the idea that you started a conversation instead of just trying to shove those thoughts down. I'm guessing, the intergenerational trauma or even, your personal demons, call them what you want, that you were tempted to just silence them, but then you understood, no, this is a dialogue here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, at first I always explain this as like, at first it might be a part of yourself that's like your heart is maybe knocking on the door to the mind being like, can we talk? At the beginning. And then eventually it becomes this like little, you call it your inner child, your wounded child, whatever it is, the part of you that is now holding a box of matches and it's like your little arsonist ready to burn the building down. It's like, no, you're not hearing my knock. So now I'm going to light this thing on fire. Now you are going to listen to me because your intention was to understand it. So you're going to get what you've asked for, and now you have to level up, be strong enough to receive what you're about to ask for, because the only way to get through the fire is to go into it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Alchemize it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in the essay that I read on your website. Vela, hey, that leads to another question I had. What is the name of the website?
Lupa Vela.
Yeah, Lupa Vela. And I, of course, Googled that. And depending on which Latin-based language you go with, it's got several potential meanings. Do you want to let the cat out of the bag and reveal the intention? Because they all made sense. Every interpretation I found of those two words in different languages, it kind of all worked.
Very cool.
What does it mean to you? Well, just I think the idea of she-wolf, but also veil and magnifier. Those words came up a lot.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah. So when I originally was trying to figure out a name because I thought, the pilgrimage is one thing, but the collective that I'm actually working on is bigger than the pilgrimage, and it's going to evolve itself. So I thought of something that was going to be that was going to resonate with kind of the energy that I've been trying to captivate over the years. And a lot of it has to do with, being the wild woman, being the wild wolf woman, and going on this voyage, going on this odyssey of understanding. And so I chose Lupa Vela because it's the she-wolf who sails the seas. It's the one that goes out, the wild woman that goes out and just finds, parts of her psyche, like collecting pieces of my soul to try and embody what it means to actually be a woman, what it means to exist, what it means to cohabitate in humanity. And and I'm just a wild card at the end of the day.
Well, speaking of the bigger picture, and I believe there's a book about your travels on the horizon. I want to understand the collective a little more, because I believe, isn't that how you met our mutual friend Angela? Doing a mural for Procyon Wildlife. Is that how you met?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So the collective, explain what the mission is of the collective a little bit.
Yeah. So the collective is about merging creativity and expression with the spiritual practice, and really finding the way that it can alter changes in humanity or inspire humanity to come back to truth. Right. I feel like it's actually a returning and a remembrance and coming home to ourselves. And creative expression, words or paintings or music invokes the feelings of something that we all, I think, inherently know. It speaks to the moral compass, but we have so much baggage or so many walls that have been built around it, or so much conditioning and construct, that we're having a hard time navigating it. And so, and I did the same thing, when I first started my artwork, I was going around Europe and I was painting and I was doing these things, but I was so unfulfilled because I was only meeting the physical, materialistic need of doing this work. And I was like, no, my artwork's more than that. And so when I came back to Canada, that's when I was like, okay, what are you passionate about? And wildlife was a huge part of my journey. And so I was like, okay, let's approach Procyon and let's see if we can collaborate. And so we did this wildlife mural for them, for like an educational trailer for when kids and people come out and they can kind of walk through it. And we had all the volunteers put their handprints on the pathway of this mural, and it was so wholesome and so beautiful. And that's where I met Angela, and we were like kindred souls. She became, we hugged immediately. She became an instant friend. Yeah, she's lovely. And then her and I are doing some collaborations as well. So it's it's evolving itself. It's recognizing that it's not just me, even though maybe I'm the one who started it and planted the seed on my journey. It's a collective of experiences with different souls. It's a collective of collaborations, and it's a collective of artists, and yeah, see how it unfolds itself.
Cool. Yeah, there's perfect transition, because I want to ask about interconnectivity, and I'll be more specific in a second. But of course, you fell in love with Angela. I'm just going to give her a shout out.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, she's just my favorite human being at this point. Yeah, and I see how you would click with her 100%. She's been so supportive of our podcast. She's been on twice, by the way, and just as good as it gets in terms of being a fellow artist and a fellow storyteller, but more importantly, a fellow human, and she just gets it.
She does.
I'm so glad that she hooked us up. But I wanted to go a little further down the interconnectivity role, because yes, your collective sounds like it's just all about the communal experience and creating art together. And so it just leads to one of the questions I had written down, which is, what did you learn about interconnectivity on your pilgrimage? A, between cultures and peoples, meaning, right, you see a lot of cultural relativity, I'm sure, but there's got to be universals as well. So what did you learn about interconnectivity between cultures, but also between man and nature? Because your work is largely about nature.
Yeah, this is it's been an interesting one, because there's a lot of overlap in cultures and spirituality and different religious practices, and it's interesting to watch the overlap and a bit of the contrast too. But a lot of it actually speaks to a lot of similarities. And for me, listening to elders and listening to ancient wisdom, all they say to me is just to go and sit into nature,
right.
Go and sit with nature. Like,
we
that's
love
your
to
teacher.
we split hairs and we start wars over tenets that are actually saying the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's this interesting thing that I think, I actually was looking at your book, The Seeker, and kind of getting an idea for it. And it's the same thing where, you go out, and people thought for my pilgrimage that I was running away from all the things. And in truth, I was. And the thing is, you can't run away from from the energy you're already embodying, because that's just going to mirror back to you. Doesn't matter where you go to.
You take yourself with you when you get out of Dodge.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times lately. Oh my goodness. But yeah, and it was actually that I was running into myself. I wasn't running away. And maybe at first I was, but I was running into something, because the environment was teaching me the different landscapes, the different energies of land and nature in different areas. They were all communicating to me. And I was learning the language of it. And I was inspired by certain people, but I also, had to understand through the unraveling of my ego, all the work that everybody else is also doing, and how we're mirroring each other, and how we're having this dance, and sometimes the dance is not conscious, right? And so when you become more conscious of it, you're actually able to dance with it better, because you're able to kind of move the energy with it, as opposed to just letting, shadow work clash and all that kind of stuff. So you're learning from nature and you're learning from people. And if you can see them all as a teacher, it's your greatest victory. No one is out to get you. Everybody is a teacher.
Yeah, you sound a little bit like me. I'm more interested in the common ground or in the universals than the disparity, but I think when you see a glaring, cultural value that's so glaringly contrasts that of, I don't know, Western European Judeo-Christian culture, you're tempted to really dig in the dirt and diagnose, but actually it's more empowering to look at the shared humanity, I would say, and the universals and the human condition. So you sound like you're a little bit more of that mindset. But I wanted to go back a little bit. I have 22 nieces and nephews, and some of them are globetrotters, and they've found a way to see the world, and it's really beautiful. But the reason I asked what your initial impetus was, because I think when you painted that series of paintings, you were 16. Is that true? I thought
the original one that's on the beginning was painted at 16. And then the series that came out of that was because I revisited the feeling of that painting when I was in New Zealand.
Oh, got it.
And then the rest of the paintings kind of flowed out of that one. But that was the initial thought. That was the initial energy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you spoke a little bit about, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, smelling the call of the wild and feeling a little dissatisfied or disillusioned with life as it stood at 16. And so the only reason I want to say this is it might be of value to some listeners. And, I think we are kindred spirits. A lot of the people that land on our podcast tend to be kindred spirits. And so what I heard you say initially was, you're just a free thinker. I never bought socialization. Hook, line, and sinker. I always saw outside the box, maybe a rebel without a cause, a lot of the qualities you described in yourself. But, when my nephew first went to Nepal, it was around the time of the earthquake, he had just been through a breakup. And so I'm the one feeling for my sister, right? Because her child was leaving the nest, and kind of and so I did kind of pick his brain. We had one coffee, and I just gently suggested the idea. Because, the alchemist, they do come home in the end, right? All the hero's journeys, you realize everything I ever needed was in my own backyard after searching far and wide. That's what the seeker is as well, by the way. It's just, you learn the lessons, and then you realize now I can transform my immediate surroundings through those goggles or whatever. It's a similar thing. But I don't know. I just felt like he was disillusioned and his heart was broken, frankly. So I had written at that point a lot about searching far and wide because your worldview is so you're so disillusioned. And no, he wasn't having it. He was like, no, I'm just sick of suburbia. Because he lived in Santa Clarita. So that goes back to when you don't buy the status quo, when human potential is so much greater than the trappings we've fallen into, that's a wonderful thing for the rest of us. So I love that you were running towards something and not away from something. But I just gently wanted to say that in your case, it sounds like those of us that find ourselves dissatisfied, and again, don't want to put words in your mouth, but you have a maybe identity crisis or an existential crisis, and you feel like there's more, or I'm meant for more. I think those that are meant for greatness feel that fire, if that makes sense, to go out and seek. And you only came into your greatness by doing it. Is that fair to say? You have more to bring back. You have more to bring, more wisdom to share with the rest of us now.
Yeah. I think a large part of that is that, first if you want to become great, you first have to unbecome what you think you are. Right. And that's the hardest lesson that anyone has to learn, because, you're born into an illusion. You're born into the illusion of this is how the world is. This is A plus B equals C. It's an equation, and it's not an equation. The actual truth behind it is that we're limitless, and that we have, this level of expansive capabilities that can actually create our own reality. But we're not taught that, right? That's we're actually trying. It's a threat to the system if we expose these kinds of truths. And that's when you're unbecoming these things, the amount of trauma or pressure or pushback on doing this oftentimes is what stops you from getting there, because it's heavy, right? And so it's where these kinds of conversations that we're starting to have, and this kind of this level of awakening that we're starting to experience in our cultures, because the world has gone so far to the other side that something needs to shift, something needs to alter. Yeah, and I think a lot of younger generations are feeling it now.
Yeah, growing pains are really uncomfortable. So, it's a scary moment, but it does signal change. And does the term dream spell illusion mean anything to you?
Not too much. Not too much.
I think
dream spell illusion. Is that what you said?
Well, Deepak Chopra talks about it. It's a kind of Native American concept, but it's exactly what you're saying. Like, you can see beyond the veil to the metaphysical truth if you choose to, but we're socialized to keep the veil intact. And there's, that has so many implications. But just kind of seeing beyond the status quo at what's really going on here, and I think it has been a steady arc. If you go back in time, and the whole New Age movement, which I despise that term to begin with, but I feel like it's latching on and the mainstream a little more every day. And I think you're absolutely right that things are coming to a head because you have people resisting the march toward human potential at all costs and digging their heels in, patriarchy and capitalism and imperialism and all these societal ills that are no longer working and haven't for centuries. There's people staunchly trying to protect them. But I do think the general march, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but is toward what you're saying, which is seeing beyond the constructs and the conceptualizations that don't serve us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of that is that sometimes, when you get to that point where you're so dissatisfied with the mediocrity of life, and
Mm,
you're searching for something more, oftentimes the anger of the victimhood of your circumstance kind of kicks in. And
thank
that's one of
God.
the bigger, yeah, right? And that's like the bigger piece to work through, because you have to realize that the anger doesn't mean, complete retaliation. Like what you're doing to your embodiment of the truth is your retaliation. But I think what happens
Mm.
is we get so angry at the system that we have this like lashback at the system, which is actually feeding the same beast that put us in the same place that we're sitting in, you
Right.
know?
Well, I don't
So
know if it's a similar conversation, but the difference between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and
yeah.
but I do say amen to all of it. I'm not a
Yeah,
militant activist in any way. I like to
totally.
think my artwork speaks for itself, and my example speaks for itself. But
Exactly.
sometimes it doesn't feel like enough. Trust me. And I wish I was a little more militant, or that I had that chip,
Mm,
but it's not what I'm here for. So I just say amen to those militant activists. You know what I mean? We all have a gift, and we're
yeah.
all meant to contribute it back to the collective, in the tapestry that is humanity. So,
Fair.
I,
Fair.
I don't
Appreciate
have
that.
that. It's just the way I mean, I don't know. I don't think some of the things that are going on right now are okay by any means. I don't know, like political assassinations, but I do
Yeah.
think amen to whatever your gifts are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, your freedom to vocalize it and to express
Yeah.
that there's a power in that, and the gentle influence of embodying what you believe of yourself to be. I think
Mhm.
that's a power in itself. Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like this goes back to the nature question. Because you've been alone with your thoughts in isolation, you have spent time in nature. Your artwork
Mm,
is really beautiful, by the way. I love,
thank you.
yeah, I love the depictions that almost use maybe indigenous tribal motifs, and somehow the decorative quality it's like looking at a mandala. It kind of centers your use of decor, if that makes sense. So I like the really
Mm.
iconic, almost regional folk art pieces. What does nature have to teach us about everything we were just talking about, like these societal ills, if you see it that way? What can we learn
Mm.
from nature about how to get along as humans? Dear Lord.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, nature isn't forced, right? And that's the biggest thing. We tend to hold to a lot of control and force, and that I think seems to be one of the most destructive powers
Mm.
in the world, because a flower, it isn't told that it has to grow a certain way. A tree isn't told it has to grow a certain way. And I used to be a horticulturist and into
Mm.
landscaping as well. So,
Mm.
and I
Mhm.
had a lot of confliction with that, because eventually I'm sitting back and I'm like, what am I trying to do to manipulate nature? Well, she knows what she's doing. You know
Wow.
what I mean?
Yeah.
She has the
Mhm.
ability to create. So what I'm actually doing is thinking that because it doesn't look, aesthetic or something, or it's not appealing because it's not perfectly proportioned into a circular shrub,
Right,
like,
right.
and that's part of the conditioning too. So unraveling that reflection, when I was working with nature, being like, actually my soul is wild and free. And when I started to embody that more, I had less of a desire to want to go and prune a tree. I
Wow.
had less of a desire to want to tamper with nature, because that's what she was trying to teach me that whole time.
Beautiful. Man, you deliver. That was, I never would have expected that. That's great. But I think in design and in art, right, we talk about variance within order, organization and chaos. These are, what designers think about. And I'm not about to define beauty, right, or even
Mhm.
art, but I think we respond to symmetry in nature, if that makes sense. We
Mhm.
respond, that's how sacred geometry came about. And
Mhm.
I think every organism has that fascinating balance between bilateral symmetry, for example, and then variance. So
Mm.
I love that what we can learn from nature is that we do have the goods, maybe in our DNA, maybe not, but to become what we're meant to become. And you just got to maybe surrender a little bit instead of trying to manipulate the outcome all the time.
Mhm.
Is that
Mhm.
related at all to what you said?
It's the hardest part. It's the surrender piece, because your whole life, that's the embodiment of actually being safe in the presence of creation itself,
Mm.
right? Whatever you call it, whatever religious, God, spirit, creator. I like using creator because it's, the indigenous roots. speak of creator.
Mhm.
But it's really the surrendering into that everything is going to be how it's going to be. And you actually can create more stress and more turmoil in your life by trying to manipulate and control it. And it's going to try and redirect you, right? That's what it's going to try and do, because, you're going against the effortless way. You're going against the wu way, the force, of
Well,
nature.
yeah. And within reason, I'm not going to
Yeah.
remember where I read this, but it's been said that, I would pray that things come to pass just as they are.
Mm.
And it's not complacency, right? It's not kind of throwing your hands in the air, but there's some wisdom in that. I would pray that things come to pass just as they are. And amen. I like that word, amen, because universal intelligence does know what it's doing. It's uncomfortable, we don't understand it. We understand the tip of an iceberg, but sometimes we have to trust that the universe, you know what I mean, knows how to maintain balance. Our bodies know how to maintain homeostasis, and it's really tough. And I guess that's what the word faith means.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's easier to say it, than to practice it.
It's true. It's true, but it's often ego when we want to control things. Anyway, no, I think there's a balance.
Yeah.
We do need to dig in the dirt. We need to diagnose. We need to discern, right? I think it's really trendy to seek to pursue non-judgment, but maybe the balance is just understand discernment is there for our survival. And so it's okay to judge if it's under the guise of discernment. I think we're all kind of struggling with that.
Yeah, it's a tool in your belt.
Right. I love that. Sorry if I'm speaking in really general terms here. Virginia, I feel like you have something to say.
I have been listening, and everything you guys have already pretty much hit on everything, so I think I'd be repeating myself. But it does, the one part, that I'd probably add to that is that from what I was taken away from it goes to like what I teach a lot when I sit with clients is it instead of going out and pursuing and trying to find meaning, is making meaning. So it kind of goes back to that whole alchemist thing, that when after you've gone on this journey, you come home, right, and you realize that everything you needed was in your backyard. It's now you have a better lens to take so your cognition can kick in and see how the pieces that already have been around you, how to put them together to make the meaning in your life, and therefore the purpose that's attached to it.
Wow. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that speaks to your hero, Frankel, as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, does he distinguish between meaning making, which is arguably a human impulse, right, to connect dots and make meaning? So assigning meaning or creating meaning, I love, you gave me the visual of taking all the elements around you and arranging them in a meaningful way, rather than going out and seeking the meaning, right, outside of yourself.
And that is actually one of the foundational pillars of logotherapy, that is through Viktor Frankl, is that concept that we have
arranging rather than seeking new circumstances and conditions.
Exactly. And I typically use the kaleidoscope a lot of the time. So that's where my narrative side comes in when I'm in therapy, to explain that to people, that we're all handed a kaleidoscope and it has the same color shards in it. And how we turn it is how we're going to see the world.
Wow.
And so it's learning how to interpret what those different colored shards are through our specific kaleidoscope, to then assign that meaning and then create the purpose.
I love it.
Amazing.
Wow. We are having a very stimulating conversation. I do. We so look forward to this podcast because, I don't know, my back's been out for 2 weeks. So I've been as close as I ever get to depressed. But this enlivens me to, realize there are some pretty cool people out there in the world, and that we're kindred spirits. And
yeah. Don't worry, I sprained my ankle 2 weeks ago, so I've also been out for a couple of weeks. I call them the spiritual timeouts.
Absolutely. Well, exactly. No. I mean, my back has been telling me, don't even do your stretches that you normally do. Like, just drool on the couch. Sometimes you do just have to drool on the couch. Okay. But no, I mean, I jokingly say, like, I can't even sit up and meditate. I know I need to, but my back is telling me, do not sit. So what should I do? Alexandra, what should I do?
Lay down to meditate.
Well, there is that. Should I do that? No, I have been quieting my mind in different ways,
Yeah.
but yes, I can totally meditate on my back. You're right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's just sometimes it's telling you that we hold so tightly to a
Mm.
conformed practice at times, where that you have to still have flexibility even in, the practice that you're embodying now. And the other day I went to go and do I was going for a kickboxing session. I was going to go rock climbing. I was going to do all these things, and then I'm walking down the stairs and I missed the last step on the stairs, and I roll my ankle, and I'm like, well, it
No.
looks like I'm not going kickboxing anymore. But it was, the irony of that is you missed the last step. You weren't meant to. You weren't listening.
Oh my God,
Go and
that's
be
so
still.
symbolic. It's
Yeah.
symbolic. Virginia,
happens quite frequently.
how long has your ankle been out, Virginia? Are you on the?
Gosh, I'm like at least 3 months, if not going 4 months in. I know I have another month where which I'm so tired of tennis shoes, supportive, athletic, insoled shoes. Yeah, it looks really great when I wear like my cute outfits and then I've got my tennies on. I've already got the bedazzler, but yeah, I'm at least 3, almost 4 months in. I have another month to go, so yeah, it has slowed me down, but it's also made me more um aware of. I don't eat unhealthy. I'm pretty good about my eating habits, but I'm now 50, and so it's that just typical, struggle that women have with their hormones and metabolic rate, right?
Mm.
And so it's made me more intentional and even more present when I'm eating, because I know if I eat certain things, it's not like I can go walk, add extra steps or hit the gym to burn those few extra calories. So it's really made me very intentional about everything I do, even like sitting, how I walk, because, for the longest time, I was obviously shifting my weight and adjusting so I wouldn't re-injure all the ligaments that I tore. So yeah, it's been an interesting process.
Yeah. Slowing down as a woman sometimes is a hard thing to do.
Because you gotta please all the people all the time.
Exactly.
And not yourself. Sorry, I have no business in this conversation.
No, blessing in disguise. It happens quite often, especially with women. We know we need to slow down at some points, but the active mind tells us, no, I've got this to do. I've got all these responsibilities. And sometimes creators like sit down.
Yeah.
And then you don't listen. And it's like, okay, well, I'll make you sit down.
Well, speaking of meaning making, that is right. These timeouts, you're there to figure out what is the spiritual significance of this, not that you invite everything, right? But what you do with it, what you do with your circumstances and conditions is always up to you. So that idea of what is this here to teach me?
Yeah.
And I love your outcome, Virginia, that just being more mindful and, more intentional was your word. I love that. In my case, I haven't figured it out yet. But part of me is like, today I was like, because I did decide, I self-diagnosed, which I often do, that it's sacral sacral iliac joint, the joint between the hips and the lower, because I don't want to go on and on, but it could be many things because I have a lot of things that kicked in because of my recent health issues and the drugs I had to be on. So it could be, real quick, I have stenosis and arthritis of the lumbar and cervical spine. So do you know what I mean? It could be a bulging disc. It could be a pinched nerve. We don't know. But the minute my sister said SI, I Googled it to look for the exercises. And I was like, oh my God, that is exactly what's going on. It has nothing to do with the other issues. So, but I did realize I've thought about the sacrum probably more than most people. It has so many nerves, right? And they're so intricately, inextricable from your bones. I just am fascinated by the sacrum. There's a lot of nerves down there. And when you have sciatica or when you have this SI joint inflammation, you feel it in your butt, you feel it running down your leg. I'm just kind of fascinated by it. So I don't know. My only conclusion at this point is the human body is fascinating. And we're lucky it works as well as it does most of the time. Do you know? That's kind of my takeaway. And also that we do have a degree, as Virginia and I just did a whole episode of agency. We're taught to be really dependent on the pharmaceutical industry and the whole medical profession. And the truth is we have more agency than we know. So my sister did heal herself from the SI, and I'm about to, once I feel like I'm not doing more damage, I'm going to do the same exercises she did. And you know what I mean? And just take care of it myself. I don't need to run to a doctor for this. Those are my takeaways. today. Talk to me tomorrow and see what I've come to.
Well,
Yeah. No.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say the fact that you reached out, well, not like you specifically reached out to your sister, Dominic, but the fact that you talked to her, let her know what was going on and then took that help. Cause I want to say that's one of the big things too, going back to the concept of interconnectivity, making meaning in our lives, finding purpose and, with my intentions and having that, self-awareness more of like, so bringing up gender roles. I was typically the one who always cleaned the house. Not that my spouse did not help. He did, but I was the main person who maintained the house, at least internally, when it came to the cleaning. And so I haven't been able to do a lot of that stuff. And today I was actually feeling better, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna really deep clean our bathroom, because my husband's been taking care of that. And I walked in, and he was already in there doing it, and I was just like, I mean, like how I would do it, and I just one, it helped me go like, wow, I need to show more appreciation in my relationships with people when they just take it upon themselves to help me out, and being better about asking for that help, to lean on those in my inner circle when I need to. So that's the other thing I think when things like this happen in our lives, it's the universe really trying to smack us upside the head and going, quit being so self-serving and self-sufficient that you forget you're part of a whole too.
I love that.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's gratitude as well, right? It's just okay. Woo! So we've been talking for about an hour, but I feel like we didn't really get to all the cultures you spent time with. I'm trying to get to New Zealand and Taranaki because I have a strange connection with Taranaki. How did you end up in New Zealand?
Okay, so after I spent a bit of time in Ireland and Europe doing some paintings, and when I came back, I did like a year of acts of service, and I was so in love with it that I wanted to stay. And then all of a sudden, I was just pushed back onto the road, circumstantially, and so I took a job training horses over in New Zealand, and got my visa, and I popped over there, and a lot of my cycles and my patterns started to repeat themselves. Even across on the other side of the world, I was faced with the same mirror, and I was like, "Oh, come on!" And so,
why would that be? Because you were back in a cosmopolitan area or surrounded by humans? Why did they kick in?
Well, a lot of the trauma and the patterns I was repeating were relational situations. So it wasn't even like the dynamic of like, the medicine of New Zealand and the Maori culture was something that was so profound in my journey, and it really walks with me in my practice in ceremony spaces. But the initial job posting that I took was working with these animals, and these animals weren't so well taken care of. And it really put me in a place of having to defend something innocent against the relationships that I would be a people pleaser in. So it was really throwing me this curveball of like, okay, well, now it's not just about me defending my innocence. It's actually about me protecting something outside of me. So it's actually pushing me to stand more in my voice and in my power of my traumas and the unraveling of my behaviorisms.
And how did that go over with ego in the equation?
Well, it's it was good at the beginning, and then eventually my ego kicked in. And
I meant them. Like, if they don't get it, and now, like you said, it's bigger than me, and I'm protecting others. Did you find a way of, you know what I mean? Asserting yourself without feeling the need to be diplomatic. That's what I heard in there. That you were trying to be a people pleaser, but maybe it was an opportunity to get past that and just stand your ground,
Yeah. Initially it was. This was one of I call this one of my bigger beasts, like one of my bigger demons to kind of work through, because I start strong, and then eventually somehow it starts to creep in, or I get a little bit tired. It starts to weaken me a little bit. And then eventually my other side of, parts of my personality maybe are taking a turn, and there's a bit of entitlement there, or a little bit of pride kicking in. And so, I'm dancing with all these accountabilities of all these moving parts. And I think, eventually I started losing my judgment because of the circumstance. And what had happened was, when I started doing that, the horse that I was training, she threw me off. And I hit the ground, and I fractured my ribs, and I fractured my collarbone, and tore all the muscles on the left side of my body. And then, that was actually like the last day I was training her, and the last day I was at this farm. And then I went and spent 2 months living off grid next to a volcano. And all of a sudden I'm here
as
and I'm
one
like,
does. Yeah.
as one does. And I'm chopping firewood with fractured ribs, and I can't pick up my bag to go home. And I'm sitting in this, it's like this spiritual timeout. And I'm like, oh, this is a big one. This is the one where we really, and this is the problem where someone gets caught in between the knowing and the acting, right? Where ignorance no longer plays a part, but it's so hard to act and change your behaviorisms when the ego can be as strong as it is. And so, and I knew better, right? And I knew I knew better. So that was my consequence. That was my karmic cycle happening. And it brought me closer to Creator.
I relate to that in that sometimes you know exactly what you need to do, but you don't have the free will to just do it. Like with my back, it's the same old thing. Like, I know what I need to do. I just can't. And then I rationalize it. Go, no, my back wants me to just lie on the couch and drool right now. And I try to figure out the message, but lately that theme has come up. I know what I need to do. Why don't I have the free will to do it? Might be the first time in my life I don't have the free will to look out for myself. Sorry, I don't know if that's related.
No, it is. And I think that's sometimes where we have to start, instead of like, challenging, I don't have the free will. It's asking yourself, why don't I have the free will? And then going into that piece of discomfort where have I lost my free will right now? What's got a hold of me that I'm not seeing? There's something hidden here that I'm not consciously bringing to the table. Something's active, in the psyche, in the shadow self or whatever.
Right.
And you're trying to be like, okay, where are you? Where are you sitting? I want to dialogue with you. And the same. Yeah.
Sorry. In your case, I've never had a broken rib, but I've heard it's one of the most painful injuries. Was there any symbolism? Was breathing? You mentioned chopping wood. Like the act of breathing is kind of fundamental to life, right? Was there any spiritual significance to the breaking of the ribs?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it was all on the left side of my body. So in ceremony spaces and stuff, your left side is your mother's side, your feminine side. So it was, I wounded my feminine side because I was acting out of my masculine energy too strong. And so I needed to learn to breathe again. And I needed to learn to be soft again. I needed to learn to come back down again, from whatever high I was riding on my ego trip, And so I had to just, it was be still, don't move, don't go in these places. And it's hard for me because I've been in survival for so long, or I've been in my masculine and I've been this, really strong, independent woman kind of attitude for so long. And now it stopped serving me. Now it was like, I actually want to be feminine, but my body wanted it. My mind wasn't catching up, and then I was like, oh, there's no communication happening here. So, and it was painful, right? And now you want to be masculine. Here you go. Here's your situation. You're masculine. You've got fractured ribs. Go and chop your firewood. You know what I mean? This is what you're asking for, and you're like, oh, maybe I actually don't want this. Maybe I want to lean on help. Maybe I want to soften. Maybe I want to receive. And this is some of the deeper questions that you start asking yourself, and what you're going into, and then you start digging up, all your trauma with it.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if the book that comes out of all of this, sorry, I don't remember the name right now, but I'm just fascinated by specific lessons when you look at, especially medical issues or health challenges, the spiritual significance of a manifestation, Will your book talk about the specific lessons you learned, again, from the elders in a given tribe or from an injury like that? And because that was such a great, when you said, it was only the left side of my body, therefore I had to really come to terms with my feminine side. Like that, is your book full of anecdotes like that? Say yes, please.
Yes, 100%. I'm 100%. It's my life's work is about being able to listen to the body. And the beauty is that's what, it's interesting that I had a big injury in a place where the Maori culture also believed that very prominently in their practice, where they believe that your body's ailments and things like that are trying to tell you something. So they don't go to the doctors first, that's right away.
Mm-hmm.
They also sit with their pain. They also sit with the discomfort. They try to understand what had happened with the scenario, and they move it. They move it out of their body with their minds. And it's skillful, and you actually can feel when you're moving something out and when you're releasing something out of your body. And the deeper you go into that practice, the more you realize, your freedom of choice just to be in your own body. Yeah. And your ailments and everything like that are telling you things. And
the agency, like I said, we did a whole episode about agency. But I did since, by the way, Virginia, I've since learned, I've become friendly with ChatGPT. I'm not proud of it, but I did ask it, literally what percentage of doctor visits, do you know what I mean, of symptoms that we seek medical attention for actually require it. 90% of things would take care of themselves if we weren't socialized to believe we depend on doctors. Literally 90%. If you just let it pass. I mean, some things take longer than others, right? Like your ankle, Virginia. But if you take the spiritual lesson thrown in your path and you do the work, it might take 2 weeks, it might take a month, it might take a year. Your body knows how to repair itself within reason. We're all going to die, right? But anyway, I love that Maori approach. And I think Western society could adopt that because we're so brainwashed to believe we need to depend on pharmaceuticals to stay above ground.
Yeah, it's the information they don't want you to know, though, right? Because it's what's feeding them.
Right. Well, I try to, I think, thank God for Western medicine, some of the developments. I just think we need to acknowledge the spiritual the energetic element. We treat everything chemically. What about prevention? What about diet and lifestyle? And so I don't like to poo-poo modern Western medicine. Thank God for some of the advancements. However, and I think we are on that path, we're starting to embrace Eastern tradition a little more and talk about energetic influences and not just chemical, right? But anyway, I do resonate with the Maori culture in a strange way. And I've had opportunities to work in both New Zealand and Australia, but it's been kind of a hit and miss relationship. It's never happened. But I've gotten several job offers and kind of done enough research to get excited about, whether it's Canberra or Wellington, wherever the studio is. So I feel like I'm meant to be there at some point. And some of my tattoos are Maori, by the way. So what is the biggest thing you learned from them? Was it that agency with regard to health, or what was the biggest thing you learned from the Maori culture?
Health was a big one, but it was there's such an overlap between the indigenous culture here and the Maori culture. They have a lot of similarities, and I was so privileged to work with some Maori kids. And the kids actually became some of my greater teachers, especially when they're honoring you with a haka, or they're imparting their wisdom, and they speak about the land and the way that she communicates to you. And it's so profound what their teachings are. And you're going to adopt different things, but the premise is all indigenous tribes and cultures spoke with the land. And their interpretations alter, but they all spoke to the land. And then they inspire you to also speak to the land and their ancestors and their stars. And, some of the most beautiful stars you've ever seen have been in Aotearoa. I should say Aotearoa as opposed to New Zealand, just to honor them a bit better. But, they've been stripped of that culture, but they're so resilient. They're warriors. They're not going to let history or anything like that stop them from what they're embodying. And I think it's the most beautiful thing to be a witness of.
Well, let me ask you this, because obviously our podcast is all about story. It seems to me that the origin stories, right, and the mythology of that culture is what communicates these principles, right? They're so connected to the land. Like even just the origin story of Taranaki is so defining. It's so defining about the Maori culture. Do you want to talk to that a little bit? The mythology, the sort of archetypes inherent in these origin stories?
Yeah. So, when I was in Mount Taranaki, it was around Matariki, which was their Maori New Year's, and they celebrate the seven sisters, which are the seven stars in the sky. So they use constellations quite a lot. But they speak about your mana. So your mana is your spirit, right? And so you've got the water and all the different elements that are dancing with you. And but they have a regard for their elders and for the women. And the seven sisters was what they celebrate on Matariki. So it's these seven sisters that go up onto this mountain and they try and fly their kites. And the wind wasn't picking up. So all of the sisters decided to sleep under this tree. And the last sister, the youngest sister, she didn't sleep under the tree. She was awake. She was waiting for the wind. She was all excited. She really wanted her kite to fly. And when the sisters woke up, she was praying for the wind. And when the sisters woke up, the kite was in the air. All of their kites were in the air. And so they all became the stars. And so it became this beautiful celebration. And, you know, you're witnessing all these people come together on a day like this, and you're watching them celebrate the stars. You're watching them with their hakas, you know, in honoring of the elements and honoring of the elders and the teachings. And there's so much to learn there. I haven't even personally learned even the surface of it. I've just been honored to witness a few events, but there's so much more to unpack. And if they're willing to teach you, and that's the most beautiful part, a lot of them are, you know, if you're willing to listen.
Yeah, wow. Well, you said something a few minutes ago I want to follow up on, which is, you know, the Maori culture seems to share a lot with Native American culture. Why do you suppose that is? I mean, I could speculate through my own worldview, but why do you suppose a lot of indigenous cultures share so much?
So after traveling from, you know, different places and experiencing things, I think, you know, and the shamans that I actually walk with when I'm in Africa, they put it so beautifully, that Creator reached our hearts in different ways. And that's why there's an overlap. You know, Creator reached the people of North America the same way that he reached the people of, you know, Aotearoa, the same way he reached the people of Africa. The way that they interpret, because our creativity is limitless and our perspective and our interpretation can be limitless, reflects in those cultures, reflects to the land of that area, reflects to the teachings. And that's where, like, you know, we get medicines from and that kind of thing. So although the medicines may be different, although the practices may be different, the overlap is the initial principle of their practice. And that's the same, you know.
It's fascinating to me. You know, Joseph Campbell is a comparative religion expert, right? And so when you start going down that road of, like, whether it's Joseph Campbell or Moore, you see that we're just wired to understand the metaphysical disposition of the universe, you know, and we're wired to have a huge understanding of nature. And it's kind of what we're calling the dream spell illusion, or I did anyway, that it's socialization and the status quo, you know, that blinds us to our innate wiring to understand existence. Does that make sense a little bit? And that's what we have to undo. You know, when I heard a parallel too, like you did some personal work through isolation, but you also undid some socialization. So we understand ourselves better when we go on these walkabouts or these medicine walks, but we also begin to understand the human condition better. Does that make sense? It's parallel. There's always the micro and the macro.
Absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, you know, what Creator really wants is you just to be closer to the essence of which you come from, right? And that's the hard part, because the ego is what separates you from Creator. And it's, you know, we speak of ego in a negative connotation sometimes, but it's really, you know, our defensive mechanism, our protection, our survivor, you know, that lives within us. And
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No,
there's
ahead.
a theme in The Seeker about how, yes, we're all extensions of collective consciousness, right? We're just a little chunk of collective consciousness, but the only way to exist in the physical realm is, through ego. So you don't get eaten by a tiger, or, you know, like it's the gift. We get the gift of life in the physical realm because of our ego as an extension of collective consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's when you're unraveling those parts, you're thanking it as you're doing it. So it allows that, we have this war going on inside of ourselves, and we're frustrated and we're shameful, and we're creating the vicious loop that keeps us cycling in the ego, as opposed to just seeing it for what it is and saying, well, thank you. You kept me safe.
Right.
You know,
we like to demonize it. We demonize our
Exactly.
base instincts. And anyway,
they just need a little love.
Right. Well, that's Thomas More, embracing the shadow, as we said, embracing the shadow side of human nature. And Virginia, what about Jungian philosophy? That's largely about embracing the shadow as well, isn't it?
It is the shadow self versus the known self. I'm not. I know it. It's just not my deep dive. I'm more on the other side of the thing. But when I was listening to you guys, you know, going on about that, so this is a concept, a theory that for identity formation that I'm working with. So it's the whole concept of authentic self versus our constructive identity, and it's relational, the way is relational to each other. So basically the authentic self is our unconditioned essence. So when you were talking about creator, or the universal, to me those are the undeniable truths, right, that resonate no matter where we are, or what language we speak. They're just the, you know, they're just the truths that are the truth. So and I know people are like, well, here's my personal truth, and I think that's where the socialization, the culture, the words we use to describe it is when we say it's our truth, because we just say things in a different way, but the undeniable truths are still what they are, even if we use a different language to or word to try and describe it. So
I love it. Yeah, I like that.
So that's what I was saying. So that's pretty much how the authentic self is. It's that unconditioned essence of who we are, the part of us that basically exists before the layers of the expectations, the socializations, the survival strategies, the narratives that were given at birth from our families of origin, the culture in which we're grown up in, and then anything else, that's on the, external side of things. And then it's those things that basically become our constructed identity. It's the things
There's
that
so
we
many
decide to take on.
Yeah, so many parallels. That's what's fascinating when you look at, human nature through a psychological lens. Or I think there's so many ways of expressing it. But one parallel that occurs to me is, I think we've talked about it a little bit on here, Virginia, the DMN, the default mode network of the brain. It's what literally ensures that you understand, it's like you're saying, personality, identity, and it's largely constructed through memory, but we don't even know where memories live, right? But it's the only way you don't lose yourself and immerse yourself in the collective is this understanding that you're a discrete, right, individual, and yet only brain chemistry, maybe serotonin. I think there's a couple others that determine just how how strong your sense of self is. And we all have moments, like we've said, when we have peak experiences or when we're meditating, where we recognize our interconnectivity. And Deepak Chopra would say in MetaHuman, and a squid could appear in your driveway.
Right.
Like the field of pure potential kind of takes over. And if you've ever had a family member with Alzheimer's, you have a front row seat to how you lose all those identifiers of the individual and they become much more immersed in the collective. Is that a parallel or not? Did I imagine that?
No, it is, and I think, and then Alexandra brought up, perfectly when she was talking about the ego, how it is our protective mechanism, and that's the thing we see when someone has, like you just said, like dementia, Alzheimer's, is the ego side, which is part of the construct. For me, I consider that's your constructed identity, right? Because that's the cognition that comes in to take those things, to say this is who I am and put it into words, so it's an identifiable, basically art form living within the collective. And so that's what we see disappear. It's when,
because we get exhausted. Ego is exhausting, right?
It is, because it's always changing. It's in constant motion.
I love it. Alexandra, ego, diffusion of ego, Alzheimer's, anything?
Yeah. No, actually, I've been a witness to a few people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and it's an interesting thing to like watch, even just with children, from from young kids all the way to elderly people, how the evolution of the ego starts to change, where it begins, where it starts to like create itself. And then when it starts to unravel itself or alter itself to meet the condition of the human body, of the physical, right? And it's interesting because I use music as a tool a lot of the times with people who have Alzheimer's, if I'm doing any kind of healing work or anything like that. And it's amazing.
So powerful, isn't it, to tap back into their identity?
Yeah. And like they may not remember any single family member, but the vibrational frequency of music isn't gone. So then it goes to show like that the creativity, or like the consciousness of something that's beyond maybe the the intellectual side of being human, exists still behind the scenes there, and still brings them joy and peace and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's soul level, right? Yeah, I've seen some amazing. Well, again, there's so many examples in our own family, but I've seen some amazing videos of how music. It's not that it brings them back because it's soul level, like we said, but they just seem more present somehow.
Yeah, joyful. I mean, it must be hard to be, in a state of confusion constantly, and things not always operating, and people around you that you all of a sudden knew and now you don't know. But music, the familiarity and the joy, like if we can give somebody that who's going through a time like, that's a little bit confusing, then I think we're doing okay in humanity.
I love that. Yeah.
So here's a thought that ties to that, which also goes back to the whole, creative side and how story comes into it. So as I was listening to you guys talk about, I was thinking how the ego constructs the walls to protect, but the authentic self opens windows to see. So if we think about that, healing isn't about erasing that ego. It's teaching us to serve the truth rather than to defend the illusion.
I like that.
I was going to say, and I'll sit with that one for a while. We always, on second listen, by the way, this will seem way more linear, Alexandra. And there's always so much more there. We're always, we try not to, but we're often thinking of the next thing we're going to say. And I think Virginia and I both, I don't want to speak for you, but we're always amazed how linear these conversations are on second listen and how there's always multiple levels. But anyway, on that note, we're definitely not going to get to everything. So you're one of the guests that I'm going to say, please come on for a part 2. Because
I'd love to.
I love picking your brain, and it's stimulating for me. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you're really hoping to impart to listeners? I want to we'll be putting your links, by the way, in the episode description. So I want everybody to look out for the book. And is there a crowdfunding campaign for the book? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah. So I just launched that. Just if what I'm going to do is just kind of put some information out there, and a lot of the things that I do in Africa, I'll be going back in a few weeks, are a lot of grassroots projects in like communities that are very impoverished and whatnot. So not only is the book or the artwork and that kind of stuff, all their sales kind of is funneled into projects like that overseas, but also if anybody feels called to donating and whatnot, it's kind of I'm a big fan of NGOs and things like that, but I'm also a big fan of going into speaking with the people, and that's kind of what I've devoted my last 6 months to doing, was actually having communication with people and finding out and listening to their needs rather than just assuming that I know what they need. And so I'd like to just, act as a little bit of a bridge that, if people want to put some money towards people, that I can make sure that it gets directly to them. And then there's not like a lot of, middleman and administrative stuff that kind of happens in between. But other than that, just look out for the book.
Okay. And we'll put a link to Lupa Vela as well.
Yeah.
But just, I guess I'm saying we're getting down to the wire here. So any final words of wisdom you would like to share, or anything we didn't get to other than the logistics of Lupa Vela and the funding?
No, I think I'm just grateful. I think it's, today has been a very insightful time. It's been there's a lot of resonance speaking with you guys, and it's nice to see the evolution of the journey. Like I said, from like a story told, a story lived into a story told. So it's really a first step, and I'm so honored to be on this podcast and sharing it with you and hearing your wisdom as well. And it's more like a cheers to the beginning with a lot of gratitude.
Well, thank you. We feel very blessed to have you, and I know not only is some of this going to resonate with listeners, but you're going to inspire a lot of people. You certainly inspired me. So thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you, guys.
All right, Virginia. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. All right. And to our listeners, remember, life is story, and we can get our hands in the clay. Individually and collectively, we can tell a new story. See you next time.
We want to take a moment to thank our wonderful listeners and supporters. Your continued support and sharing of our podcast helps us spread the transformative power of storytelling. If you enjoy our episodes, please rate and review us on your favorite platform and share the podcast with friends and family. For more enriching conversations and insights, subscribe to Language of the Soul podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Follow us on social media and visit our Patreon website for the latest updates and exclusive content. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories to life. If you'd like to support us further, consider joining our Patreon community for exclusive content and donation options. Every bit of support helps us reach more hearts and minds.